welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Jidu Auto Insights, a management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at jiduautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon from my side. I am your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 89. The headlines: Argo, gone. Jidu is walking the moonwalk with the limited lunar edition. Lotus Eletre finally launched, and Geely's brands are going at it with each other. XPeng holds Tech Day, I think, under immense pressure, and Tesla cuts prices, also under pressure.
Yeah.
That's the headlines.
With a domestic competitor following suit without hesitation. So,
what do you want to talk about first? Jidu, Argo? I think those were the...
let's start on a high note. We both watched the Jidu Auto Unveil. So, what did you think?
Well, like I said, in our messages with our good friend Tony, it was good. It was a lot of substance. No best SUV under renminbi 5 million or 500,000 BS. It's good. I think it's really looking back, right? This is day number 605. So that means in about 100 days, 130 days, it'll be 2 years old. And I don't think you can find any company that launches and probably delivers a vehicle 2 years after the brand was announced. I think that was this is the best example of the China EV speed, right?
Let us unpack that statement you made fully, because it's not only product development speed that needs to be lightning fast, but capital needs to be there. People need to be there. The right circumstances need to be in place. And so I had lunch with Frank, as you know, last week, and he did say there's Silicon Valley speed, there is China speed, and then there is Jidu speed. So maybe we are introducing a new term here, because we did both talk about how fast things are moving and how excited he is about everything that's been happening. And just like the Shanghai Gigafactory going up in less than a year before job number 1 rolled off, I'm amazed at this unveil and how fast things moved. And I feel privileged because you and I have Frank on DM, so we can ask him questions directly, and he's pretty open about a lot of things. So, I value that he trusts us like that, and we're cheerleaders of his now, because not only was he a guest on our China EVs and More Max series, but he's a straight up good dude, and we want the best for everyone in the EV, AV, and mobility space, right? We don't have any grudges for sure. And I think the last thing I'll say is that the car looks mostly like the prototype that was unveiled in March.
That's an important point.
And the last thing I'll say is that I am American, so I am not familiar and used to all of the little gadgets and all the little pop-ups that happen to be in Chinese design and Chinese vehicles and Chinese websites and Chinese mobile apps. So the clean lines and almost the constraint that Frank had in designing this vehicle, I think really, really emphasizes how good looking it is to me. So
Yeah, it's well designed. There's a lot of quirky design features. I think you made an important point that this actually a lot of the features that were on the concept edition were retained, except we knew that the lidar position was not going to be on the hood.
right.
And the doors are even crazy. There's no door handles. Did you see that? I think that was interesting because I've been reading some Chinese chatter. Does you know how these new door handles are flush
Yes.
with the doors, and the customers that go into the showrooms that check out these cars, the first thing that they get, they don't know what to do is how to open the door.
The first thing they get confused about. Yeah.
And now I guess Joe, he's saying, this should be touchless. You can open the door with your phone. I think, things like that. And also the cockpit was pretty much right. What was on the concept with the yoke? I heard that Joe drives a Model X himself, and he really liked it. So yeah, I think he makes a lot of decisions on these features.
So just for our audience sake, Joe Xia is Xia Yiping, who is the CEO of Jidu Auto, and Frank, that I referred to earlier, is Frank Wu, who's the head of design at Jidu Auto. So the two people that are primarily responsible for the design and likely the UX of the current Robo-01. So
yeah, and I hear that Jidu already has over 2,000 employees, and
yes,
a lot of them are working on software stuff. So, and this is the important point to make, and you've tweeted it, is there's hardware and software integration and making it work. It doesn't, I mean, no matter what you have the 8295, you're the first EV that has that Qualcomm chip. But unless you can, you make it as smooth as you promised, then it doesn't matter what you have, 8295, the two orange chips, right? These are all top of the line that you can find. That's why I said, it's the as smart EV as you can find on the market, and also with the sensors.
And a reminder to everyone that I was clearly told that they're competing directly against Tesla. So Tesla, relative to its Chinese competitors, has a really simple UX, almost too simple. And in the United States, it's still, I won't say cutting edge or bleeding edge, but it's still up front, right? Because if you look at the Ford Mach-E, there's still a physical knob. And so I told you I was talking to a bunch of startup founders earlier, and this is why we pushed our call out or Twitter space out 30 minutes. But to your point about the door handles, if you're disrupting a sector, your whole job is to change habits. And how successful they are at creating a new habit where we don't have door handles, we just use our app, or we use the key fob to open the doors. I think that's a simple indication of the types of small features that Jidu wants to influence or change habits of Chinese customers for, right? So, I want to remind people, because I just reminded some folks on an earlier call, that you can't listen to the naysayers, and Frank and Joe obviously have not, where it's like, well, these guys have been doing this for 30 years the same way. And that's the definition of why you need to make that change, right? Not to change for change's sake, but because this is called progress. And so, the one thing that I will say is that the flush door handles were never a legacy thing. They were custom cars started that trend, and then the legacies and EV companies really brought that into the mainstream. So,
and Joe, he has a specific KPI, which is really simple. What is success? Success is 10,000, the 10K club. We have to be in the 10K club. So 10,000 deliveries a month. That's success to him. That's like a hard benchmark that internally Jidu is trying to achieve. Obviously, this specific Luna edition limited, they're going to only have 2,000 units.
Yeah.
Right. So the first 1,000 is already pre-ordered, and they
to some pretty famous people.
Yeah. So I heard Robin Lee, he's owner 001, and the author of the Three Bodies, or the famous the Chinese novel. He is 004, and if people have read about that novel, there's this Chinese called 前进四, which means the battleship's the fourth accelerator gear, right? That was the meaning behind it.
Right.
So, and then also this point-to-point autopilot, they call it PPA, which is similar to XPeng's XNGP, right? So all scenario autonomous driving feature. So, yeah.
And I expect Jidu Auto to continue to be very fast. And there's going to be unveiling at the Guangzhou Auto Show. So they're going to roll right into this aggressive planning and product planning. So God bless it. God bless it.
Yeah. And Frank had told us sort of that this Unveil in Guangzhou is not some concept. It's already done. The second model is already done.
3/4 done or something like that.
Yeah. So it's the exterior, and then probably around the same time, they'll have the standard version, I guess lower priced. Probably, I'd say it's probably going to be around 350,000 RMB or below. So below $50,000 for the standard edition. And Frank did stress that this is going to be the Jidu's, the first models, they're going to be above 200,000 RMB.
Right.
That's our positioning. So, it's I'm just saying Geely has a lot going on, right? So there's this, there's the Polestar 3, there's the Eletre, and they just launched that Boyue L, which is 100,000 renminbi car that you said kind of looked like the Robo-01.
The silhouette looks very similar. So
I mean, Geely's models, they span, from the 100,000 RMB to the, so let's say $15,000 to well over $120,000 with the Eletre and the Polestar 3. That's their lineup. So
yeah, God bless them, because they have global ambitions, and they're really, outside of BYD and NIO, the only ones that have been sort of successful, because MG currently sells pretty well in Thailand. LDV sells pretty well as a commercial vehicle in Australia. MG sells pretty well in the UK, obviously. And so Polestar is doing pretty well in Europe. And I can't think of any other EV makers that have, besides NIO and BYD anyways, that have gotten a pretty positive response from the European audience. So we've seen what a bad reception can do, and XPeng is basically reorganizing based on some challenges that they had, and the international had left, and iWays has not been able to really gain that much traction. I think part of the challenge for iWays was that they only had one product. We'll see how the U6 gained some traction, but again, I see Geely really, really being aggressive. How aggressive they'll be in the United States remains to be seen.
But makes me think that at least in the China EV space, the expectations is whenever these new models, they're launching these 300,000 RMB, 400,000 RMB models, and it's kind of expected from the consumers in the sense that it's not expensive. It's expected. Whereas the legacies, when they launch an EV that's, let's say, a 500,000 RMB, it doesn't feel right. You see what I'm saying? The expectations have totally, I think, changed, at least on the price premium glass ceiling of it.
Here's my theory on that, Lei. It's because the Chinese consumer feels that the foreign legacy is selling them a Frankenstein ICE with a battery bolted on the bottom, and it's not clean sheet. It is a derivative of an ICE vehicle that's not optimized for an electric powertrain, right?
Yeah. And that's why again you're seeing these Mercedes, Volkswagen, they're really banking on the second half of this decade with all their new, whether it's the MMA, MBA, whether it's Volkswagen's SSP, right? These all new platforms, they're really looking forward to that. And whatever they have launched now is just kind of the
What's the bridge?
It's the bridge, it's the appetizer, sort of.
And
right.
I'm completely on board with that strategy for Europe and the United States. In China, within 5 years, they might get shut out. I'm not saying literally never sell a car, but I'm saying the size and the influence and the brand cachet might not be there anymore for them.
Yeah.
I think you and I agree with that because that's how fast the market is moving. So
let me ask you an interesting question. So the Eletre and the Polestar 3 are priced similarly. They are positioned similarly in terms of vehicle shape and size. If you had the money, which one would you pick and buy?
I'd probably buy the Lotus.
Shaking your hands.
Yes. So I just prefer a bit more substantial interior. And I think the Polestar 3 looks very clean, looks very nice, but I do understand the Lotus heritage. So I'm banking on the maneuverability, the quickness, and some of that heritage being part of the Eletre's DNA. But you're splitting hairs. I don't think, I do believe that they're going to kind of cannibalize each other a little bit.
Right. But we both know the volume drivers are none of these two models from those brands. They're probably Polestar 4 will be a volume driver, and then the upcoming Type, I don't know what the number is, but the later models.
But we have to remember, Lei, that, well, Polestar is a brand new brand, but the parent and Lotus, they've never been volume vehicles. Volvo has sold hundreds of thousands, but never in the millions. And Lotus has sold in the thousands per year, right? And so this is completely brand new territory. And I would challenge the notion that maybe these brands can't sell in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, right? I just don't know.
I heard that the Lotus Eletre, the pricing, at least for China, some expect it to be a lot more. In fact, probably around 200,000 RMB more. So that's what I heard.
So similar to Polestar then, because Polestar's pricing in China is off the charts.
Right, it's more than Europe. And it's not the same case with Lotus. And I think I would pick Lotus simply because of this brand positioning of the UK Formula One aerodynamics heritage.
Sure.
And actually, if you really compare the features, I think the Lotus is probably my pick. So if I had those money,
But remember that you and I have a deep background in the automotive space. We understand Lotus's heritage and history, and so maybe that's coloring our opinion a bit. A lot of consumers, especially because I believe in China, the Lotus will be more geared towards women. They don't know that history. So do they lean into that for the China market? I don't know. My intuition tells me that I should not really push that as much as just being a really cool British heritage brand that is reinventing itself. That would be my positioning. I don't know if women really care about its racing heritage and Formula One history, right? At least in China. That's what I'm saying. At least in China. And we see that because they've already announced pricing in 8 markets in Europe, that they are banking on Lotus being or the Eletre being a pretty significant entry for them into Europe. So
I need to correct your pronunciation. It's Eletre.
it's Eletre or not Eletre?
Eletre.
Thank you.
That's how the British pronounce it. So,
Oh, okay.
Eletre.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, jeez. Okay. But move on to Argo.
Argo?
What are your thoughts?
Argo, we're talking Argo not because it's a US Europe thing, because this has implications globally and with China written all over it. Because I think that the surprise was that Argo was actually believed to be one of the better AV startups.
Full stop. Most of the people I respect told me that Argo had a pretty good team, had a pretty good product. So
yeah, and if you read the fine print of all these statements from Volkswagen and Ford, I mean, it's a day of reckoning. It's a day of kind of this day of infamy almost, and reality sets in of what they really want to achieve cost effectively and what the customers want.
And it should be for rational people a negative reflection on what Tesla is trying to say autopilot and FSD does.
Yes. So we should look at this Argo thing. So yesterday, four big news happened in the industry. Argo shuts down. The Department of Justice is doing a probe into Tesla FSD.
3 of them.
Yeah, and Mobileye IPOs for the second time. And then ZF spun off the passive safety division, which was basically TRW that they acquired 7 years ago. These are all kind of interconnected on why, right? So, and
there's a couple of people that let me say this real quick. There's a couple of people that I talked to behind the scenes, and they push back a little bit that everything has to involve China. And I'm like, you know what? You don't get it then, right? Because these are global automakers, and it does, because they're not saying, what's my strategy for the US? What's my strategy for China? What's my strategy for Germany? They are, but when they're making these types of decisions, these are global strategic decisions, divestments, investments, partnerships. And so if they're not thinking about China, I'm not saying that China drives every decision that they make, but it has to be a factor. So,
and again, right, in the Volkswagen, right? I mean, they clearly stated the CARIAD is going to drive the development of the highly automated and autonomous driving in China with Horizon Robotics, and in the rest of the world with Bosch. And you kind of, yeah, right. And then the first functions from the Bosch plan for 2023, and then they're working with a unnamed partner for the Volkswagen commercial vehicles,
right?
Which is doing this ID Buzz with Moya that used to work with Argo that was absorbed into the Munich operations, right?
Right.
And I have to quote this Oliver Bloom statement again. Focus and speed are what count, especially when it comes to developing technology of the future. Our goal is to offer our customers the most powerful functions at the earliest possible time and to set up our development as cost effectively as possible. He talks about speed again.
Yeah. And Ford's decision is $1 and cents decision. And I think so whether or not these decisions that are being made now by Volkswagen and Ford, for example, the investment in Horizon, the divestment or not continuing funding Argo, whether they are prudent decisions, we'll find out in 5, 6, 7 years. But I applaud Bluma. I applaud Farley for making these bold decisions, because bold things need to happen in order for their moves into the EV, AV, and mobility space to happen. They can't just incrementally catch up to their competitors in China and the United States, right? Because Tesla is lapping them in the US. Full stop.
Yeah, it is also interesting to see both Volkswagen and Ford leaning toward this level 3, right? Both they believe that this is something that's more going to drive more value for the customers. And L4, and I must say you had a great comment when we talked to Septon CEO Dr. Jin Pei, when he asked you when is, right, the robo-taxis, you said 15 years, and he said 16 years. He was even a little bit
More
and now to
precise.
think, yeah, and now to think that back to that conversation and see what happened yesterday, this is the realization. I think Ford specifically, they in that 10Q statement, right, saying whatever about the prospects of L4, and it's not what they expected. It's taking longer, whereas they believe L2 plus L3 is going to drive more value. That's a realization.
And that's where, to me, that was a dollars and cents plus minus spreadsheet question and answer, right?
Yeah.
And this really leans into they're going to start selling level 3 ADAS services in their cars. They're not going to give that away for free because they see that opportunity in the future to build that services revenue via these ADAS levels. And so Argo has 2,000 employees. How many will be absorbed into Volkswagen and Ford? I don't know. And remember that I think 350 of them or 400 of them came from Volkswagen in Munich. So this could be Volkswagen's opportunity to bring them back on, at least the talented ones, right? And so these are big moves, and we are emphasizing what we feel are the important ones. The Volkswagen Horizon, to me, is like, I can't believe more people aren't talking about it. But I think we'll see how significant they become in the coming years with the backdrop of the US-China relationship, with the backdrop of the Germany-China relationship, with the backdrop of the US-China relationship, because that's who's companies from those three countries will be driving a lot of the adoption of these new technologies and these new services, I feel. So,
yeah. And, we shouldn't write off AVs because it is happening. And a good example is UIC, my good friend, Wu Gansha. I mean, his driverless, these little vehicles have been operating in airports and industrial complexes for months and years now. So we really have to look at this through different lenses. And AVs might not be ready in terms of let's say a robo-taxi that operates any time of the day everywhere, but it is happening. So,
I feel like on the agri-tech side, on the commercial vehicle side, and I'm talking construction vehicles, I'm talking
Caterpillars, right?
Yeah, that's definitely already commercialized. And to me, that's more of a what happens to that labor question than is the tech ready for commercialization. That tech is ready, because if I am harvesting acres and acres of corn, do I need that one person or two people driving the I don't even know what it's called, the machine that harvests the corn? I probably don't. And then on top of that, you have these drones that kind of oversee everything, right? And so that can be completely automated. But in China and the United States, now people are losing their jobs and people are losing their farms. And so that becomes really, to me, the catalyst as to how fast, not the catalyst, but the inflection point of when this really becomes a thing, because we need to find new jobs, or we need to figure out what we're going to do with the people that are displaced, right?
Yeah. But it's just so interesting to see this kind of this winter is coming almost. And looking back in 2016 and 17, when all the promises were made, or these expectations that 2021 will have robo-taxis on the roads. We do. I mean, Cruise, they're doing it in some way, but these expectations, let's say from the BMW group, right? That was announced in 2016. Ford, they were all looking at 2021, and now we're almost into 2023.
And the weird thing is, Lei, that China might go full steam ahead, and where the United States, I think, might take a more precautionary step or take precautionary steps towards level 4 and level 5.
Yeah, and Maxwell Joe from Deep Brow, he said 2026. So, right?
Yeah. But the crazy thing is these legacies, these AV companies, these are smart guys. Most of them have PhDs. So they knew this coming in, right? And so to your point, winter's coming, the environment has changed. Okay. And specifically for Volkswagen and Ford, who have certain challenges in regions and markets that they operate in, where that capital is needed elsewhere. Okay. So Ford, for instance, and we've talked about this in the past, but let me succinctly detail. Ford, they have the Mach-E as an electric vehicle in China. They have the F-150 and Mach-E here in the US, but for the most part, the last couple of vehicles that they launched outside of the Mach-E were petrol engine vehicles. If Ford is going to be competitive, that needs to change in the next 18 months, full stop, or they'll lose hundreds of thousands of sales. So, and you know, they're bringing the Bronco and the Ranger, but they're likely going to be ICE vehicles over to China. So those are going to be incremental sales. They're not going to drive volume from the standpoint of what's needed for them to thrive. Okay, and Volkswagen, we've said this ad nauseum. 50% of their profits are coming from China. Their Volkswagen brand has lost hundreds of thousands of units of volume per year for the last 3 or 4 years in sales. Their ID series is selling about 12 to 15,000 units a month across 5 products. So these are the immediate challenges that Ford and Volkswagen have to really, really remedy and fix. So kudos to them that they looked at their wallet and their bank account and said, I can't fund this for the next 10 years and still be successful with my product plan. So that's what I think.
Yeah, just really, I mean, if for those that have watched closely the industry, especially AV space, especially around the 2015, 2016, those were the kind of, right, the Dr. Jim Pei, he said, you know, the mushrooming of not only the LiDAR companies, but the AV companies, right? And now we're seeing, right, earlier, Ibeo, the LiDAR company, bankrupt, right? We didn't talk about that, and now Argo is gone.
I still think it's, but you know, we're talking about this binary transaction, but I still am doing some research to figure out why weren't assets sold? Why did Volkswagen and Ford agree to like share the IP of the existing Argo company? You know, I want to understand more details, and we'll figure it out, I'm sure, between our connections. But it's an interesting story that hopefully we'll get a full picture of in the coming weeks. And you know, the other thing that I wanted to bring and point out is maybe this is the canary in the coal mine, because you and I have read and been told that 2023, if the central government doesn't extend subsidies, we could see a more challenging EV environment, sales environment in China. And if that is the case, and we have already seen some pricing competition kind of as key leading indicators, right? So we'll see more and more EV companies go kaput in China as well. And maybe that's necessary, because I think there have been some EV CEOs that said there are too many brands, which should help them. But unfortunately, one of the companies that might go kaput is one that 4 years ago, I think you and I thought had a real good chance, WM.
Yeah.
You saw that rumor, or you saw that article about them cutting staff salaries?
Yes. So
that's...
And Faraday Future.
fair. I will never bet against Faraday. I'm sorry, Lei. I just think they're this cockroach that will be in existence.
Surprisingly, you're optimistic. You're always the pessimistic guy.
I'm not optimistic that they'll get the FF91 to market. I just don't know if they'll ever like close their doors.
Yeah, right.
They're like this cockroach that's just like
99 lives,
yes,
not 9 lives.
Yes. And so it's just a really, really interesting time. And now that I'm a bit more focused on the U.S. market as well, or we're a bit more focused on the U.S. market, I think we're seeing that messiness, right? Because the U.S. government has made this big, bold proclamation that the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, that we want to be a player, and they're handing out all this money. A lot of it's going to be wasted unnecessarily, unfortunately, but we will see more innovation. We will see more startups coming out of the United States. And I'm hopeful that there will be 5 or 6 over the next 10 years that can make products that are competitive versus the Model 3 versus the Mach-E, and can rival and compete against CATL and BYD and Goshen. And you and I are friends. I'd like to say we're friends with Mujib, and so we're cheerleaders for him too, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? It just makes things interesting because you and I are freaking nerds, and we want to know more. We want to see more. And comment on Monday Morning Quarterback, where we think they're doing well and where we think they're not doing well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the cool stuff for us, right? And hopefully
it's easy for us to do.
Well, but let me also take a step back, and this is probably just something that you and I should say in private, but I'm hoping that I pull you in on some projects, right? So you and I can work on some of these projects together.
Yeah. XPeng and Tesla, I think, worth a mention because G9 just started deliveries.
Yep.
I didn't feel the fanfare was as heightened as some of the other deliveries because they're under immense pressure, right? They just did this tech day.
Yeah.
They're reorganizing their company. Tesla just cut prices. The LA is launching.
The XPeng's existing products are long in the tooth, very old.
Yeah, and they're probably a bit more sidetracked on some of the other projects than the other competitors.
The flying car?
the robots, the flying cars, which I really didn't like. The second edition, the iteration. It felt heavy. It felt...
They just bolted on some arms and some propellers into an existing car.
Yeah. And He Xiaopeng, I mean, he quipped. He said this thing only goes how many kilometers on the ground, but in the air it only does like 10 or 20 kilometers tops. So I mean, he said that at the event. So
they're quite literally making the flying car, right?
Yeah,
it is like the form factor is a car with propellers on it. So not super imaginative. I'm hoping that they can gain a lot of data points from these pilots and these prototypes and then form a theory that guides their design process for this flying car. And to your point, Lei, XPeng's share price is down, I want to say over 80% since the beginning of the year. So that's where a lot of that pressure is coming from. So
no, what I'm saying is that they have probably the most distractions, let's just put it that way, among all their competitors in terms of a focus, in terms of the things that they need to take care of, the reorganization, the G9 pricing, the product cadence, launch production cadence, the backlash, right? And their sales are going down.
And we have to remember, Lei, that if you're a talented software developer, the recruiters know who you are, the other EV startups that have promising prospects know who you are, and they're trying to poach you. So
yeah, and then going back to the comparison of the Argo news, we talked so much about the China speed, but if we look at XPeng's City NGP and the X NGP they're trying to launch, right? How long that has taken? It's probably not too much related to technology, but still, right? You have to take into consideration of all these issues that hamper your rollout schedule. And it's going to be 2 years since April 2021, the Shanghai Auto Show, when this was a huge thing. Right now, they're not there. Guangzhou started. They're going to go into Shenzhen and Shanghai probably next year. But right, this it just keeps going. That tells you the difficulties even in these level 2+ features and in China.
On top of new competitors, on top of competitors launching at a furious rate, new features, new products. And this is where Tesla is not leading the pack, not dictating the speed and the level of competition, right? So let's move on to Tesla. I can buy a made in China Model 3 in China right now for $10,000 cheaper than I can buy it in the US. $37,000 versus $47,000. Can you believe that?
Yeah, no.
And so this whole BS that demand isn't softening for Tesla in China, you and I predicted this last summer. So
yeah, but psychologically, like there's nobody other than Tesla, other than the Model Y, when you can buy one for under 300,000 RMB.
Oh man,
it's such a psychological attractive driver for consumers
because the supercharging network, it's still there, so there's value there.
So what I started seeing happening was they started this referral thing again,
the insurance thing again.
My WeChat moments, I saw at least half a dozen people posting, here's my code. They're owners of Teslas in China and go and buy it. So and I also heard that some stores are selling like these like crazy.
But that's the thing, right? This is why Xpeng is under so much pressure, because there will be multiple offers and multiple price discounts or multiple ancillary items that will come along with a vehicle purchase throughout Q4 of 2022 for the Chinese consumer. So if you have an older product and you discount it, is it still going to? Is the Chinese consumer convinced? Or would they still just rather buy that Tesla because it's not going to be much more cheaper, right? Because Tesla is selling at $36,000 and it's unbelievable. So, man, and it is a weird thing to see because they're very strong in most other parts of the world, right? I saw a tweet that said the Model Y is the best-selling SUV in Europe in September. They still dominate the United States markets. So, wow, what a difference the China market makes. And, I described in my newsletter, which will be going out later today, they have 1.2 million units of capacity that they need to ship out. And they can't ship it to Europe. And remember, their production volume dictates whether or not they get those subsidies for taxes from the Shanghai government, right? So if they're not building, they're paying more taxes in Shanghai. So there's a lot of other things going on as to why they would be incentivized to keep production going at Shanghai Giga at 80, 90, 95% capacity. And
that's the pressure. Yeah.
And so I don't know if most people realize that those incentives that they signed up for have disclaimers and escalators on them, right?
And the numbers are that I think in the first 9 months, the total shipment out of Shanghai Giga were just under 500,000 units, and the official capacity is 750,000.
Right.
So and Q4 probably Shanghai is going to again, based on this price cut, drive a lot of volume in order for Tesla to meet the 50% growth, which I think in the latest earnings call that they kind of said it's probably going to be tough.
Yep.
But it's going to have a domino effect, that's for sure.
Oh, they're going to take they're going to take companies down with them for sure, right? And one of the other things that I had written is that outside of the capacity that they need to sell, that this is just going to really, really start a price war that will never end, because an SOE will always go lower for certain. And, it's going to cause a lot of pain for companies in 2023 that can't really afford to slash pricing because they're only selling 8,000 units a month, because they're only selling 6,000 units a month. And I see Tesla going even further in 2023, perhaps.
Yeah, they're not done.
Yeah.
In terms of price cuts.
Yeah. And there was a rumor that there's going to be a refreshed Model 3 introduced in 2023. That can't happen fast enough for Tesla. So
really, I mean, in retrospect, when we got off 3 episodes ago, right before the October holiday, we talked about that rumored price cut. That didn't happen. That ended up being that 7,000, 8,000 RMB, was it insurance?
Yep.
Savings?
Yep.
I think they tried that. They probably didn't see too much effect from that. And plus, I think the reason why they waited until October 24th was because the party Congress was in session. And I think they probably thought they don't want to, right?
Yeah.
do something during that time to cause kind of revolt or from the customers. So they waited.
I think 2 other companies to definitely expect, and you add to this list, to expect some either price cuts or some sort of incentive, in increased incentive to purchase. XPeng and Volkswagen are probably 2 companies that I would look towards. BYD will also do that. Not as severe.
They will do it a different way. BYD is launching a lower priced Han EV, I think early next year.
Right.
This was just listed in the latest catalog.
So when you say lower price, that really reads into decontented, take out some content. But hey, I'm all done right now, but let's open it up if is anyone with any questions. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, Lei?
No, I think we're pretty much, that's all the topics that were listed.
Actually, I will plant some seeds in your head, because I'd like your take in maybe next week's episode or the following episode, how you think Twitter will change with Elon now the owner. And I think you know what I mean by change. And one thing that I did want to note that was kind of a head scratcher for me is that my sister, I told you, just retired from General Motors. And now they have announced that starting in 2023, they will require employees to be back in the office 2 or 3 days a week. And people are starting to complain. And
because they've gotten used to life.
Well, my sister, and I'm not only saying GM, but my sister said that some of the GM employees, and I'm sure Ford is the same way, I'm sure Stellantis is the same way, physically moved out of Michigan. And so these people, first of all, they seem to be a little bit entitled, because the largest disruption they've ever seen in their lifetime is happening to the automotive sector, and they don't want to go into the office 2 days a week to work, which seems, it's not like GM said 5 days a week, full stop. And they're going to allow the most talented employees to probably have some flexibility. But you know what? You're doing GM, Ford, and these guys if you don't want to go back, they need to lay a lot of people off. And this could be their excuse to do that. So if you really want to keep this job, really, honestly, it's like 2 days a week, guys. It's not the end of the world. So that's really all I had for today, sir. So we will do a better job of maintaining a time. Today was my fault. We were kind of experimenting with the change in time. I think the change in time at 3 o'clock is good. Let's just keep it at 3 p.m. on Thursdays.
Sure.
Because I think it might have confused some of our listeners, but let's just do that. and commit to 3 p.m. every Thursday. And then hopefully we'll get a lot of our audience back for next time. But I don't have anything else. How about you?
Just housekeeping. We'll be watching Bianca launch this Sunday.
Yes.
In 3 days. And October sales will be out following that, which we'll talk about in next week's episode. And I'm hearing or seeing that October is actually going to be down month on month, partially due to the holiday, but so that will be interesting to see.
Oh, that's gonna mean they scramble for November and December. So
yeah, I think my expectations for October is that we will not, let's say from the Neos, the Xpongs, or the Li Autos, we're not going to see a step change. Let's say they go from 10,000 units to all of a sudden to 15, 20,000.
Right.
We're not going to see that. And then other than that, happy Halloween.
Yes. Happy Halloween.
It's next Monday. I got that. Did you see that Baidu
Yes.
did that
AI
thing? And I'm a cackling witch.
Oh, jeez.
And that's generated by AI.
Yep.
based on the words. So
all right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining, and we will talk to you all on next week.
same here.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.